All right, everyone. So we're diving into a language today that I think is seriously cool, but maybe a little bit mysterious to some. Get ready to unlock some secrets about Turkish.
It's definitely a language that surprises people. For starters, when we think Turkish, we usually think Turkey, right? But it's actually spoken by way more people than you might expect. We're talking nearly 90 million worldwide.
Wow, 90 million. I had no idea. So where are all these Turkish speakers?
Well, obviously Turkey, it's the official language there, and Cyprus too. But you'll also find pockets of Turkish speakers in places like the Balkans, Central Asia, even parts of Europe. It's a real testament to the legacy of the Ottoman Empire, you know?
Oh, totally. It's kind of like the further back in history you go, the more Turkish spread around. It was the language of a powerful empire.
Exactly. And like any language with a long history, it's picked up some really interesting features along the way.
Like what? Give me the elevator pitch. What makes Turkish so unique?
Two things you really need to know: vowel harmony and agglutination.
Okay, I'll bite. Vowel harmony, agglutination. Tell me more.
So vowel harmony, it's kind of like, imagine the vowels in a word all have to get along, right? They have to belong to a certain group, almost like a family.
So it's like they're all singing in tune.
Yeah, you could say that. It creates this really nice flow to the language, a kind of musicality.
Okay, I can get behind that. Now, what about agglutination? You made it sound kind of intimidating.
It's really not that bad once you get your head around it. Think of it like this. Instead of having separate words for everything or adding little prepositions here and there, you just take a word and keep adding suffixes onto it, like you're building a tower with Legos. Each suffix adds a new layer of meaning.
Okay, that sounds kind of fun, actually. Yeah, you can just keep adding on and on. But what does that look like in practice?
Well, I could give you an extreme example, but it might break your brain a little. Are you ready for this?
Hit me.
Czechoslovakia'leştirmediklerimizdenmişsiniz.
I think I just had a stroke trying to say that. What does that even mean?
All right, so maybe that one was a bit much. It actually means in the manner of you being one of those that we apparently couldn't manage to convert to Czechoslovakian.
You weren't kidding about it being a mouthful, but I kind of love it.
The point is that one word shows you how much information Turkish can pack in using agglutination. It's a pretty core feature, not just in Turkish, by the way, but in a whole bunch of related languages that kind of spread out from Central Asia.
Fascinating. So we're already talking about Turkish spreading and evolving. Let's rewind even further back. Where did this language come from in the first place?
Well, the earliest forms of Turkish, we can trace those back to around the 8th century. We're talking the Oghuz Turks who were living in Central Asia. And this is where things get really cool. We have actual inscriptions on stone, things like the Orkhon inscriptions that give us these little windows into what Turkish looked and sounded like back then.
Wow, those must feel like linguistic time capsules.
Exactly. And over time, as Turkish spread and interacted with other cultures, it started to change and adapt. We can see the influence of Arabic, Persian, even Greek. It's really remarkable how languages can be shaped by the world around them. It's all there in the vocabulary, like a hidden history.
It's pretty amazing how much history is baked into a single language.
And Turkish hasn't just evolved gradually, you know. It's had some pretty dramatic moments, too. We can't talk about the evolution of Turkish without talking about Ataturk.
Ataturk, right. Early 1900s, huge reforms, wasn't he, behind the whole change in the writing system?
Exactly. 1928, Turkey makes the switch from the Arabic script to a brand new Latin-based alphabet. It was a huge deal.
I can't even imagine waking up one day and suddenly everything's in a different alphabet.
Yeah.
How did people even adjust to that?
It was a massive national effort, really. They even set up this organization, the Turkish Language Association, to oversee the whole thing.
So it wasn't just about the alphabet then. They were really trying to reshape the language in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. Ataturk saw language as key to modernizing Turkey, creating a distinct national identity. They wanted to move away from the Ottoman past, and that meant taking a good hard look at the vocabulary too.
So what did they do? Just start swapping out words they didn't like?
Pretty much. They were on a mission to get rid of Arabic and Persian loanwords. Sometimes they'd go back to older Turkish words that had fallen out of use. Other times they'd just invent totally new ones.
Did it work? Did people actually start using the new words?
Well, it was a mixed bag. Some of the new words stuck around, some didn't. People can be pretty attached to the words they grew up with, you know? Like, they tried to replace fırtka, which means political party, with a new word, bölüm. But people just kept using fırtka, and eventually they just gave up and went with the French word parti instead.
So, even with a big push, you can't force a language to change overnight. What about the old Turkish words they tried to bring back? Any success stories there?
Oh yeah, definitely. There were some real comebacks. The word batik, for instance, it used to mean book, but it kind of fell out of use. But then with all these reforms, they brought it back, and now it's commonly used in computer science to mean script.
I love that. Gives you a whole new appreciation for the words we use every day, doesn't it? So we've got this language with a fascinating history. It's got these cool linguistic quirks, and it's gone through some pretty major changes over the centuries. What else should we know about Turkish? What else makes it special?
Well, one thing that often gets overlooked is the sheer diversity of Turkish. We often talk about it as if it's one single thing, but in reality, there are so many different dialects.
Really? I have to admit, I hadn't even thought about that.
Oh, it's true. Each region has its own unique flavor of Turkish. Different accents, different slang, even slightly different grammar sometimes.
That makes sense, though, right? The more spread out a language is, the more likely it is to branch out and evolve in different directions. Any examples of that really illustrate this diversity?
Well, how about this? Did you know there's actually a Turkish dialect that's been influenced by Greek? Over near the Black Sea in the Trabzon region, you find all these traces of Greek mixed in with the Turkish spoken there. It's a real testament to how closely connected these cultures have been historically.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Ancient inscriptions, language revolutions, Greek-infused dialects, but we haven't gotten back to those Lego words yet. Tell me more about how those work, because I have a feeling there are even more surprises in store for us.
Okay, so last time we were talking about Turkish words like their Lego creations, and honestly, that image is still stuck in my head. I need to know more about this agglutination thing because it's just so cool.
It really is a fascinating way to build words. And you know, those possessive suffixes we talked about earlier, they're kind of the key to understanding how it all works.
Right, the suffixes remind me again how those work. So basically, instead of having separate words for my or your or his, you use these little suffixes that get tacked onto the noun. So, like to say my house, you wouldn't say my and then house. You'd say evim, ev being house, and that im at the end, that's your possessive suffix.
Ah, okay, so it's like you're literally attaching the possession directly onto the word itself.
Exactly. And it's not just for possession either. Turkish uses suffixes for all sorts of things, plurals, directions, even to create verb tenses. It's remarkably efficient once you get the hang of it.
So it's not just about sounding cool, although I have to admit, it does sound pretty cool.
Well, it definitely has a certain elegance to it, but it's also incredibly precise. You can pack a lot of meaning into a single word by carefully choosing which suffixes to add on.
I bet. So for our listeners who are out there thinking, wow, Turkish sounds amazing, but also a little intimidating, what would you say? Why should we care about these linguistic quirks? What's the big takeaway here?
You know, I think the most important thing to remember about Turkish is that it reminds us that there are so many different ways a language can work. It challenges our assumptions about what grammar is supposed to be.
It's like it's opening up a whole new dimension of what language can be.
Exactly. And it can even help you understand other languages, too. Turkish is part of a huge language family that stretches all the way from Eastern Europe to Siberia. We're talking Finnish, Hungarian, Korean, even Japanese share some similarities.
Wow, so Turkish is like a gateway to a whole world of languages.
That's a great way to put it. It's a reminder that languages are interconnected, constantly influencing and shaping each other. And to really appreciate a language, you have to go beyond just the words and grammar and understand the history, the culture, the people who speak it. Turkish has all of that in spades.
I'm convinced. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they head out into the world, perhaps with a newfound appreciation for the Turkish language?
You know, just because we're wrapping up our deep dive today doesn't mean the exploration has to end. If Turkish has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to keep digging. There are so many resources available online, and in libraries you can even find language learning apps if you're feeling ambitious. Turkish might seem a little different, a little mysterious at first, but trust me, it's a language that rewards curiosity. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to our listeners, if you could borrow one thing from Turkish and bring it into English, what would it be? Think about it. Until next time, happy exploring.